On behalf of Happy Parenting Malta for Happier Children, I welcome you to this campaign we are doing from the 1st December to 17 December, a campaign where we are listening and seeing members telling their stories about difficult situations in their family. Today we have a member of Happy Parenting Malta from UK. We can start with your story.
Thank you. My story begins in this chapter of my life, where in 2007, where I met a lady from Malta in the UK when she was in the UK studying. And we had a whirlwind romance at the beginning, just like the movies. Everything seemed to be perfect. Now, after about a year, she was caught pregnant and something she was very worried about. We planned to get married. We would both understand how important marriage is in the cultural backgrounds we were brought up in relation to having children. So we went and got secretly married abroad, and then when we came back to Malta on a trip back from the wedding, she had a discussion with the father who basically had threatened her not to be pregnant outside of wedlock. And this is what I was told by her. And then she made the decision to have an abortion, which I was really upset at. This did actually all happen at the time I became a millionaire, exactly at the same time. And people have often commented about the coincidence, but it was genuine. And there definitely was an abortion. It wasn't a fake pregnancy or anything. So then we're in a situation, no children, no open marriage, but we were secretly married. But then we had to have a show wedding in Malta the year afterwards, with nobody knowing about this secret first marriage. One thing that is important to establish, and I'll go into this why, is that my partner, then ex-wife, was sexually abused as a child. And the reason this is important, and it actually something that I found out later on. I'm not a psychologist. I am a doctor. I am a lawyer. But it does have an effect, apparently, on people once they have children. And I think it's something called a trigger. So when somebody has been sexually abused as a child and then they have children, this can affect their well-being. And what I can say is that after we had children, life was completely different. You look at those first few years without children, and everything was just like a Hollywood movie, and actually it changed completely. So after the second show wedding, we had our first child born a couple of years later, living in the UK. And then in 2014, I moved back to Malta with the first child, planning for a second child to be born. Travelling backwards and forwards from Malta for 5 years, and one reason or another we ended up splitting up and getting divorced in 2018. One of the requests put in at the beginning was a monthly allowance payment to ex-wife of 10,000 euros or 10,300 euros a month, until the children were 23, which I was flabbergasted over that this could even be suggested. Stupidly, I say back stupidly now, I agreed to pay £5,000 a month, which I did for, a couple of years or so, as well as paying the school fees and so on, and actually left me in a position where it was crippling me. Until all of our divorce and details was sorted out, I was in a situation where all I was doing was paying out maintenance, paying out in legal fees, which are beyond belief, both in the UK and then eventually Malta legal proceedings start. And, when you're doing this along with work, you're literally firefighting. You don't have a moment to evaluate where all this turmoil is coming from and how to deal with it. And you have to pay monthly £5,000. And bear in mind, that's £5,000 after tax, which I agreed to pay, and I was paying. To pay £5,000 a month after tax, you have to earn like £9,000 in England. And they wanted 10,000 a month, which is equivalent of earning like 18,000 a month in England before tax. So these payments were all after tax.
And you were seeing the children at that time?
So at the beginning of the split up, I was seeing the children when they came to the UK, but I had concerns about my children staying in Malta because of the paedophilia that had occurred in the family. It had been admitted in court. It had been admitted that had been covered up by the family and the priest who dealt with the family, if that's the right word. And I was just concerned that my lack of presence in Malta, people knowing me and the mother aren't together anymore, would leave my children vulnerable. When we're together, I was able to exert a presence around the people who have covered up the child abuse. But, I needed to make sure that my children weren't exposed to anything. And by the way, in the end, I ended up having a daughter who's now at the age, just older, than when my wife was abused. So, that was a real concern when I was, let's say, leaving my children in the care of people who have covered up child abuse to a family member, what they're going to do for my child if anything happens. I do think the mother was very diligent over the safety for the children, but nevertheless they were left alone with the people who, in question, who I'm talking about. Anyway, I'm now in a position where I'm working all hours to pay these maintenance fees. And then all of a sudden, child access is stopped. I had a situation where my ex-wife committed fraud against me, and it was a finding in the UK courts. It's not hearsay. It's on legal documents. Committed fraud against me, and a way to cover it up in Malta, which is where the fraud took place, for hundreds of thousands of pounds. That was the the amount in question, hundreds of thousands of pounds. In an attempt to cover it up, there was an allegation made of theft by me to the police in Malta. I lived in England, wasn't always able to come in for interviews and so on, so they just pressed charges, issued charges, and I had to go through a court system in Malta, which ended up taking 5 or 6 years. 6 years, and during this time, straight away after I was accused of theft, I was stopped from seeing the children. I had to go through the UK court system, even though the children lived in Malta. Ex-wife said she'd be happy for this to be dealt with in England, which I thought would make it easier for me. In the end, I won some access, and then ended up visiting Malta regularly. And all of a sudden, when I issued annulment proceedings on this second sham wedding in Malta, access stopped again. Had to go through the court system again. Eventually, representing myself, I did win access once again. But again, this is a year where I have to go to access centres to see my children, agency, Apodge, in Malta, see the kids in a small bare room. We've got to do that three times a week, Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday.
How many hours?
2 hours. 2 hours 3 times a week. And actually, like I said previously to people, it was actually a very fruitful experience, as well as being terribly painful. The children didn't like going to Apodge, but they loved coming to see me. But it actually helped me become a better parent in terms of, imagine if you're in an empty room. I don't mean with a nice sofa and a television. I don't mean with a sofa and some board games. I mean an empty room. If we're lucky, there'd be a whiteboard in there which you could draw, and having to improvise and keep your kids entertained for a couple of hours. And if you've been, a parent who's been working all the time to try and make other types of dreams happen, then sometimes it's a strange thing to do.
But the children were happy with you there.
They absolutely loved it because it was guaranteed we'd get to see each other rather than just having. The thing is, the priority at those times was the children coming to Apodge and seeing their parent. If I take today, for example, I've travelled 1,500 miles to see my children. I've come for the weekend and I'm hoping to see my children maybe all day, all night, whatever. It'd be great. But I got the initial instruction was I'd see them for an hour to work around the tennis and the football. The priority now is the football, the tennis, going to see the friends, anything else but seeing the father. So that's the difference when Apodge and the agency is involved and the court to say he must see them at that time. The priority is contact, whereas now the priority is everything else but contact. You fit around them and you can see him this time. As it happens, I ended up seeing him for 2.5 hours today because one thing was cancelled for them and another. So, I get last dregs of the drink, as it were. In the bottom of the barrel, there's some left over. There you go.
So you come from England to see your children?
So, from England to see the children.
How often?
So, how often? I was here last month on the 7th, the middle of November. I always come around this time for the birthdays. And I try to come as often as possible. It was much easier previously when I had, let's call it a residence here. So after we split up, X kept the family home to reside in, and I had this other property which we have, and there's another property as well. I could have gone in any of them, but ex-wife said one of them wasn't habitable. It was fine for me, but I listened to her expression. And then there was another property which I ended up going in, which actually wasn't a really nice place, but for me it was a home because I made it a home. Prior to that, I was staying in hotels when I came over, which is no family environment for children. When I had this other, let's call it rundown property, I made it into a home where we could sit on the sofa, watch a movie, cook pancakes. I was cooking pancakes, pizza, whatever else. And taking with me that imagination and the working off the cuff to entertain the children, which I learnt at Apodge, I have to say, a lot, doing it at home, and we had a great time. But then we were in a situation where the UK courts ended up giving up all the properties in Malta, and that left me in a situation where I couldn't get another mortgage in Malta because of the consequences of divorce proceedings and so on. I couldn't work in Malta because ex-wife had prevented me from working due to a permit which I needed. And I was now in a situation, no residence, no earning potential, And I was literally left in a situation I didn't see a way out of. I said to the judge, look, you're supposed to have the interests of the children first. I said, you wrote that in your judgment. He said, yes, that is true. He says, but that's not relevant here. I said, look, it's in your statement, in your summing up, that children must come first. And then I said, you've now left me in a position where I've been seeing the children for this many years in this property, and you've taken it away. They literally don't care. And unfortunately, the divorce courts now, it's like the National Health Service, they want the numbers through and things over and done with. And it's just taken for granted now that often the father will be in a situation where the far worse financially afterwards. It doesn't matter what you own before, it doesn't matter whether, even to the point where it doesn't matter if it affects contact with the children, because that's exactly what it did. So it went from seeing them every couple of weeks to every month. And then after losing the premises here and ability to work, there was a stint of around 10 months where physically I didn't see them, because she stopped bringing them to the UK in 2018, despite a judge's orders. Bring them twice a year, Christmas holidays, summer holidays, and one of the October half term, I think it was. Yes, 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 Judge. And then all of that stopped. They've not had a recreational visit to the UK since, and it's always been reliant on me going over there. Father's over 90 years old, mother's elderly with disabilities. It breaks the heart that they've not seen these kids who, especially the eldest, who my grandmother was so besotted by him. They had such a good relationship. In fact, even when I have video calls with them and he sees him, he's like, Granny! His face lights up. It's different with the other two because they don't know her as well, but this one, he had it wrapped around his finger. Heartbreaking that she's not seen him. But, so it has been a situation where contact has been diminished. The financial burden in terms of how much I was paying initially voluntarily and then to what they were asking, over 10,000 a month. I didn't know a way out. I didn't know how I'd cope if this was ever awarded. 10,000 a month, and specifically request was until the children are 23. And when I looked at the schedule of how this worked it out, they've put in haircuts, makeup, going out this much, and so on and so forth. I don't know how you could possibly spend over 10,000 a month and how you could feel comfortable requesting it. And then the other person is in the dire situation of finding a way, like a lot of people do. Something's come up, you find a way, but how can you do that for the next 20 years or whatever?
But currently, how much are you paying?
At the moment, the award ended up being €900 a month. 900. And I've been told even that is, a lot higher than it should be. And to be honest with you, I don't see why it should be that much. Why should it be that much? There was a discussion. There's no order in place now. It's voluntarily what I'm giving. There was a discussion over whether they should try and get it reduced in the Maltese courts, but I don't want to go through more legal proceedings. If I can tolerate that much for now, then I'll keep that going.
So did I understand well, your ex-wife has income from various other aspects?
Yeah, I mean, she's got the property. She's
She works as well.
a medical professional here in Malta. When it came to wages and school fees and everything else, she said she'd borrowed 50,000. This is what's recorded in the courts. She'd borrowed 50,000 for school fees, which I'm supposed to contribute to paying back, as well as paying the school fees, as well as other things. There was no proof of income, wages, wage slips, anything else. It was just a case of, well, I got it all in cash and so on. So what I'm saying is the burden of proof for their requirements for these payments was very little, I believe. I think it was very unfair. Um, and yeah, it was just, you just, it was almost like it was just taken as the truth, despite, them being found to have committed fraud during all of these proceedings. Um, Changing property valuations for hundreds of thousands of pounds so that they'd be better off. It's found in a court that committed fraud. Nothing ever, no punishment, um, and still just an acceptance of ex-wife
With
as
all,
a,
with,
as a as a as a private medical professional, high up.
yeah, with all this going on,
€1,200 a month she said she was earning, which
do
didn't
you
make sense.
mention anything to your children when you see them about this?
No,
How
no.
how do you cope around this?
I think partly because the time with the children is so little. At the moment, there are no child orders in place. There's no restriction on me seeing them, having them overnight, everything. But that's taken 6 years to get to this stage. Um, allegations made later on, everything's dropped in terms of come and be assessed for your parenting skills and so on. When it happens in the UK, then it changes there to no orders. Then it happens in Malta, it changes to no orders. It's one of the problems you have with multiple jurisdictions is that an alienating parent can start playing off one jurisdiction against the other. So, for example, if things didn't go the way in UK, they then bring a case in Malta. It's just happened again now. And this is a problem, but at the moment, even though there are no child orders in place and arrangement orders, it is still a case of whatever she will allow. So again, today I had my 1 hour. Thankfully, it was increased to almost 2.5 today. Now, I could have said, well, actually, no, they want to stay with me, so pick them up later on. I could have said that. But that short-term gain of a few hours with them now would then have resulted in her stopping child access altogether, and then I'd have to go through the Maltese courts again, and then it'll take another year, 2 years. I'd probably end up going back to Apodge or whatever else. So that was the one good thing about Apodge and being referred there because of her saying I was an unsafe parent is at least you were guaranteed access. I was really grateful for that.
So, conclusion, maybe you wish to pass on a message to those who may be passing through difficult times in their family life.
Well, first of all, to those who may end up passing through difficult times, if you're not married, first of all, look at the legalities of marriage and what divorce involves. When you go and have any procedure done anywhere, there's something called informed consent, but nobody tells you about the problems that can arise from a failed marriage. So take that seriously. When you're going through a hard time and you reach the stages that I did, what I will say is I got to the point where I saw a lot of damaged parents who had been through a similar situation where child access was deprived and they devoted their life to regaining child access for love of the children. And I saw a lot of people destroy themselves in the process. For me, the change came and the improvement came where I said to myself, I'm not going to allow myself to ruin myself because then I'll be no good to my kids or anybody else around me. So I did actually kind of step back from the hard fight and I became more passive in the whole thing. And I have to say, having another child after I met somebody else did help as well because as a youngster, I wasn't sure I wanted children. When you've had children and had them taken away from you, that is a whole different feeling. Your children taken away from you. You're not allowed to see your own children just because of a false allegation that's made. It happens all the time, and it's often fueled by finances, because if you have more custody over a child or more nights spent with the child, then you get more maintenance. This happens all the time. It's not something, you know, strange that I'm saying. It happens all the time. People are often motivated by money. So don't think about things, your financial arrangements, but don't fight to damage yourself. Take a step back, take some time out, talk to other people. For me, joining this group was critical. It just by chance, it was actually somebody from the child welfare services who recommended happy parenting. I got in touch, ended up speaking to Anthony and Mary a few years ago, and then I ended up meeting some of the other people and actually going to the groups. We used to meet on a Sunday, and even when I wasn't in the country, I used to join in by the video links, and it was such good therapy, analogous to smoking. Most successful, the most research shows that the best way to give up smoking is quit smoking groups, and I would say the best way to help yourself in times which are so challenging during marital breakup and the resulting child access issues that often take place. It's not an isolated incident. This is the norm now, and it happens because of a relationship breakup. The best thing to do is group therapy. For me, by a mile. You got a chance to speak to the group. We took it in turns, and we got a chance to ask questions, ask how people were feeling, and the actual one big thing is it's true. You're not alone. People talk about sayings. When you're younger, you hear sayings and you just repeat them. But then when you understand what a saying actually means, when you feel you're not alone, that's much better for the human soul, for the human well-being, for the psychology of humans. You're not alone. So get into these groups. There'll be one near you, whichever country you're from, for alienated parents, for those struggling with access and so on. But what we do need now in the justice system is more recognition of parental alienation. There's been a few cases where it's been referred to, far too few. It just needs discussing more and putting into legal statutes to be implemented and discussed and recognised in courts more frequently, because it's really frequent. It's very frequent, but you need to speak about it, join the group, talk. Don't do anything stupid. You hear stories of mad gunmen going off in America, and they look at the action, they don't look at the cause, and what people can do and act out of character when the chips are down. It's not on a whim. When you've been going through a grind for 5 years, not being able to see your own flesh and blood, then you've got to look after yourself and don't get too ill.
Thank you very much for sharing your story and for your recommendations for people in difficult situations of family situations to join a group. We are available. Our website is happyparentingmalta.com. Contact us.